Hello, everybody. Fantastic to listen to these presentations today. It was absolutely amazing. It's not often that I have the pleasure of being able to spend 4 hours and listening to one thing, or let's say many things, but at the same place, and it's fantastic. I will just share with you a few minutes of my experience and what I'm working with right now, and what I see as some kind of insightful, whether it is or not, you judge, but session to talk about what we see from our perspective when it comes to digitalization of production and supply chain environments, which is a lot of what I work with on a day-to-day basis. So we will stay on Earth, and we will keep everything related to net zero at the back of our minds when we discuss about this. But I will try to share with you some insights. So let's see if this works now. Seems not. Can somebody move to the next slide? Okay. Some of you, I think, might have heard one or two of the speeches I did before. I will be a little bit repetitive, but I promise you I've added one point to at the end, which is new. So, okay, so just hang on, stay on with you. I will talk first a little bit about what we call archetypes. So that's a way to classify different types of production environments, because as we all understand, there's not just one next gen or future factory environment, there will be many. I will also not stay too long on it, but I always think that we are too poor in trying to understand what are the real trends behind the evolution that we're living, that is really driving the transformation, the needs that are arising in the market. And as you all know, or might know, trends are universal. Culture is just a filter of time. I have this discussion very often with my best friends in Spain or in France or wherever, but that's my conviction. So it has strong effects on what we're going to talk about now. Then there are, however, there are archetypes of factories, but there are building blocks which are common. This is how we normally work when we work with our clients to try to define where are we going together. And then there is one piece of the equation that I think is very often omitted when we talk about the future manufacturing or supply chain environment, and that is that the digitalization has to go, or evolution of things have to go hand in hand with the current OPEX system. And for those of you who know their Shingo, TPM, Lean, Six Sigma, Black Magic, whatever you want to call it, you know that this is a very, very important foundation to be able to stand solidly when you move forward and transform. So we'll talk 1 minute about that. And then basically, I have been in the last, what is it now, 4 months, I've been working like every third week in the Arab Emirates for one of my clients who is investing heavily in building up a fantastically interesting manufacturing, we call it hub is not the right word because it's more of an ecosystem solution provider for manufacturing to enable their manufacturing around the world. And I will show you an insight into that. Okay, so those are the 5 slides I have. And who am I? My name is Tobias. I have a background in starting automotive. I started up here somewhere. I studied technical physics here at the Royal Institute of Technology 100 trillion years ago and like 40 kilos ago. And then I ventured into the automotive industry for 5 years. And then I went into telecom, spent 10 years in Ericsson. I know quite a lot of people here from Ericsson. And then I've been now working as a management consultant outside for 10 years, basically with EFESO. EFESO is a merger of 2 companies. EFESO, which is 3 years ago was appointed world leader in OPEX systems, so basically manufacturing operating systems when it comes to the world I just talked about on Lean, Six Sigma, TPM, and so on, and Shingo-based philosophy, basically. And ROI is a German, fantastic consulting firm that has been working with many of the leading German groups to develop what's now the Industry 4.0 paradigm, and basically driven out of Europe to a big extent, which I think we should be very proud of. Lots of very strong German companies that are far ahead in this game. Okay. And I'm the proud let's say, I'm the MD of the Nordic operations. So we work out of Sweden and Finland, Norway, and Denmark, but mainly essentially out of Sweden today. So I don't know if this one can, yeah. So I promised to say a word about archetypes. For those of you who have been working in industry environments, you know that it's very different if you're working in a kind of manual intense assembly type of industry, where you have characteristics of, quite low capex, but you have tremendous challenges on line balancing, getting things to work in a specific way. And it's very much sometimes in the manual labor still. Our guys, our friends at Atlas Copco are trying to do what they can to bring also the manual labor into something much more advanced, which is very nice to see. Then you have the continuous process industry. We had a very nice presentation from the forest industry here just a moment ago with cellulose fiber. And I worked extensively over these last 10 years with our leading firms in this industry, like SCA, Stora Enso, Billerud, Huhtamäki, Tetra Pak, and all these guys that are really strong also. And here they're completely different environments. The new investment of SCA, in Umeå is a 300-meter long, 11-meter wide machine that will produce. It's an 800 million euro investment that will produce a tremendous amount of containment board. And here, extremely capex intense, process control and OE. Those are the two numbers that are really counted. And then finally, you have the type of highly optimized manufacturing. Here's represented by semiconductors. So kind of the very highly optimized stations that are connected. And so it's a mix of, let's say, multiple production steps that are loosely linked. And you have a completely different dynamics here. So here is the scheduling and coordination, that's the trick. And if you have some of these companies, they produce different parts in different parts of the world, they ship their things around and then connect and so on. So it's quite in different layers, as you know. These are 3 examples. In total, we work with around 14, 15, sometimes 16 archetypes. So when we talk about the future of the digitalized industry or manufacturing environment, we have to see this, okay? Then I said I would talk about the trends. We've heard a lot about the sustainability paradigm we're entering. Circularity is a part of that. All of you know what this means. It means we have to tear down walls, be much more transparent across value chains and so on. But a very, very strong trend is the digitalization, here represented by automation and AI as 2 strong trends. Resilience for different reasons. All of this has an impact on what we work with from a day-to-day, let's say, perspective. So we will see much smaller and more flexible factories organized in networks, and also sometimes in the region for the region. As you know that when Jacob Wallenberg got the question, how do you deal with China? And he said, we will continue working in China, but we will work within the region of China. So the answer is not that we will become more local, let's say, not global, but we will have more local and regional chains of production. There will be an integration across value networks. I'm active in an organization called Dornbirn, which is basically a cross-fiber organization. So cellulose fiber, textile fiber, chemical fiber that tries to use inputs and outputs from the different parts and create a circular flow and across different parts of it. So what's output for one might be input for another and so on. There will be a modularization coming, much stronger than before. We see companies when they do brownfield investments now tearing down old structures and replacing it with a lot more modularized setups. And then, of course, the digital continuity. We will have to have fully activated data across all the supply chains, the value chains. And you'll have real-time planning, steering, decision-making process. And of course, there will be at the end of the day, at the top of the temple, at the end of the day, will be AI enabled as well. And some things remain. So the end-to-end zero loss mission that companies have been working with now for 30, 40 years to remove waste, there's about 7 types of waste and so on, that's going to prevail. But it will be based on activated data supported by AI. So much stronger and faster processes. We will have changing organizations. I was this morning with one of our clients who is building now, making huge, it's actually the biggest industrial company in Sweden, and they are now changing the way they are basically setting up their production system. So they will go into a much more complex flow with different sources of energy, you can call it, in their particular business, and also different setups for how that's going to be. But it will be all modularized and it will be in one flow. This will have a tremendous impact also on the organization, how they're going to work, the roles, the teams, and the leadership that comes out of that. And then also, finally, we see now, that's my last slide in a minute, will be around, they will start using what companies like Meta, even Apple to some extent, but basically also like Spotify, modern ways of accelerating software development. So an ecosystem structure, the one we're looking at in the Arab Emirates right now that I'm designing has around 800 partners, just to give you a perspective. So out of the fantastic presentation we saw here today, there will be so many of these components that will together form a much higher speed in developing what's going to come. Okay? I will not go through this, but these are the 10 modules that we normally work on. If, for instance, we're working with one company now that is designing their third mega factory project. It's a Swedish, let's say, originated company, and they will produce this somewhere on the planet in a gigafactory, working on 10 modules of what it's going to look like, this greenfield investment. And you have everything from the flexible factory design, the modular equipment setup, the smart robotics automation, the advanced logistics that connects back, and then the behavior, which is called augmented behavior. Maybe it's a stupid word, but it's basically the interesting thing here is, by the way, that the more we automate, the more important each single intervention of a human being will be. So that's a contradiction that I love. With less people, but every intervention has a tremendous impact. So the behavioral element here, how you act, is so important. So if you go from 8 to 3 people on a line, for instance, each action that those persons will do will have a bigger impact. So you need to work very hard on that. And the augmented element is the connected part of it. The infrastructure, which becomes IT infrastructure, which becomes super complex with different logical layers, has to be set. The cybersecurity. I'm working with one, I think it's the number 2 cybersecurity company in Sweden right now. They're developing a strategy for the future, which is super centric on supply chain, because they know that that's where the vulnerable parts will be in the future. So there will be lots of attacks coming in here. The data-driven factory management is activating all data, taking it up the ladder of let's say, maturity. And then the most important one, I think, is this one here, actually. We will hear a fantastic presentation later from MTech. We are also working with NVIDIA Universe as a partner and developing fantastic things now. And I was thinking when I heard the space presentation this morning, the last meeting when I was working with them, they talked about, or the managing director, he said, we're looking for what he called $0 billion markets. What is that? Well, a $0 billion market is a market that today does not exist, but it is $1 billion market. So, we were all asked to, please, based on your experience, where do you find that? And then one of the guys said, what about, we moved to the planet Mars, because you have unlimited computing capability and capacity, which means you can simulate anything. And you can even simulate based on the chemical, physical, material know-how we have, which is all programmed. You can basically simulate anything that will happen. So what do you say? When everybody will move to Mars, maybe the moon first, but to Mars, we can simulate that today. So that market can already be simulated. So why can you not then simulate every new production facility that you're putting on stage? And that's what's happening now. And then the sustainability is cutting across the whole industry. I will not go into detail on that because that's a whole, let's say, thing of its own. There is, of course, behind each one of these boxes, there's you can just flip through all of these actually. There is, behind each one of these, there's a lot of details. Some of you might be super knowledgeable about it. I will not go through it, but it's really, really interesting what's happening here. I will stop on this because this is the simplest one. That's more or less what I manage now. But what I always think about is this 5-stage rocket of maturity that we're working on. Starting from connecting data, creating information out of data, setting in a context, making it knowledgeable, learning from patterns to be able to predict. Those predictions will then become autonomous responses by an AI engine. So this is happening in all areas, basically, all process steps and in everything. So very simple, but a very powerful slide. And then once again, the final thing here, which is the big power play right now, where so many things are happening to simulate what we don't know. So the combination of the digital twin, let's say capability, I want to call it, with what's called early management techniques. So being able to bring all past know-how from all the current OpEx systems that a company might have into this simulation environment is one of the things that MTech is doing and also others. So very, very strong. Here is, on this axis you see here, the digital transformation that our companies are going through. And here is the OpEx maturity. So if you have a company like Tetra Pak, which we worked with for 20 years to build a world-class manufacturing, they are super mature up here. Super stable processes, super strong operational steering, super strong continuous improvement, super strong, let's say, Hoshinkanri deployment models in their structure, and also many other big industrial groups. We talk a lot about this axis here, so the digital transformation, but what we must not forget is that the company that already has a mature production system, they need to move from this axis here further up, and they can enrich their current system, basically digitalizing it, or they can rethink also their OpEx system, which is something different, to create what's up here. And that's what we see now most of the big greenfield players are doing. So they're really rethinking both the OpEx system and in this digital context. And then finally, my last slide, I just put, this is right now where I'm working a lot myself. It's about accelerating this journey, and the complexity of such a journey here, if it's brownfield or greenfield, doesn't really matter because it's super complex. If it's brownfield, it's even more complex. But what this client is doing, I think, is quite interesting. The way they are going about here is they are building a learning factory. So it's a physical thing, putting a lot of money on the table to bring in all the latest technologies on 3D printing, everything that you can basically digitally enable in the production process. In a physical place, building a capacity training, which is a training center, you can call it, for their key staff around the world. And also developing a professional consulting services that they will leverage internally to drive that transformation. Because it's a lot about the biggest limiting factor here, it's us. It's not the technology, it's the people. So the training element here contains a lot of things here. So it's simulation-based very often. So it's a combination of physical and virtual training environments that they're building up, leveraging all the latest technologies from, what's it called, Barrio or from Glitchy or companies like this that has been passing through here. Then, secondly, they are leveraging here what we've done for a very long time in software development for consumer elements. So hackathons, innovation the programs or accelerator programs, different types of incubation to drive the development here much faster. And this they cannot do alone. Not even this they can do alone. And then thirdly, they're going even to the third level, which is basically creating a manufacturing ecosystem solution provider, bringing in up to 800 partners, where they will make sure that they stay furthest abreast of everybody in the world on manufacturing when it comes to understanding how to digitalize and how to create the next gen future factory. So you understand the depth of this here and the level of investment that they've taken, but they know if they do this, they will spearhead this for a long time. So I think that all big industrial firms are going to go somewhere this way. What I specifically like is that they are bringing in so many different external partners on this journey because it's so complex. We cannot do it on our own. There's no way. So I will leave you with this as a very fast, and it's a journey, a little bit of an insight from my side. So
Thank you, Tobias. That's great. Thank you so much.